laughed about that. We do a lot, right? But Ben Johns, like back in the day, he used to always do that. The thing you gotta think about when you're thinking about grips is it working for me? Do I have enough time to transition to the other shot if I'm being picked on from one side to the other? Am I generating the speed or the spin that I would like for me to be successful? And then assess from there, right? There's no perfect formula on grips. Welcome to the Flying Pickle Academy. This is Maria Lopez, one of the coaches here. And today I wanted to go through a comprehensive guide over grips and how some of them can help you, what the benefits are, how they work in the kitchen and how they work at the baseline. So today we'll go over the three major grips, which is your Continental, your Eastern, and your semi-Western in both your forehand and your backhand, and from a righty and a lefty, as well as you seeing it up close and what that looks like transitioning from one side to the other, and what some of the maybe cues that you can have and things that you can use to help you change from one to the other if you're using a much more extreme grip on one side. At the end of the day, we want our athletes to feel comfortable. Different backgrounds sometimes might give some tendencies. You might see some of like tennis players, people that have a racket sports that maybe are a little younger go with some Eastern or semi-Western grips a little bit more. People a little older like me might go more with the Continental or an Eastern grip, and we'll go over those here in a minute. But it's important to know that whatever you're using, you might have some great benefits. It also might have some limitations, especially when we're talking about going from one shot to the other. So if you have a more extreme grip on one side, it might limit you on how quickly you can turn your grip to the other side on the backhand side. I'm a lefty, so I'm gonna have here Susannah kind of demonstrate also as a right-handed player. The first one's a Continental grip. It's essentially if you're thinking about holding a hammer, okay? So if you're gonna hammer a tiny little nail, you wanna catch that just exactly there right in the middle. So, yep. So if you feel like you're a little like this and you're not catching that nail, that's more of an Eastern grip. So we wanna be straight up. You're gonna see the edge of the paddle be facing straight out to the ground. So that's a, yep, just like that. That's a Continental grip. So you can see that right in the middle. Okay, so as we're hitting a nail. The second grip will be your Eastern. So we're gonna move as if you're shaking somebody's hand. So if I'm gonna come in, you can actually put your hand coming through the paddle. So it's just a tiny bit. For me, my paddle moves a tiny bit to the right, my hand moves a little bit to the left, and the opposite will happen for Susannah as a righty. Her hand will move to the right, and her paddle will move a little bit to the left. It can be actually difficult sometimes to see the difference between a Continental and an Eastern. Is a very tiny change. So you can see here, this is your Continental grip, right? We're hitting that little nail with the hammer, and then we go into shaking the hand. You're moving a tiny bit. So for me, my hand is sliding this direction, and for her, her hand is sliding slightly to the right. The other grip you might see, again, a little more modern, faster speeds, are your semi-Western. So you're gonna go now even a little bit. So again, you're watching me shift my hand to the left, hers to the right. And then now you can see the paddle, my paddle face is facing down a little bit. You can see some of the players that can generate a lot of spin, a lot of speed is usually coming from a little more of a semi-Western. We try to think about like you're cooking a frying pan or twisting a pizza, right? So it's a little bit more of a semi-Western grip. So the three most used grips you will see here are Continental grip, as if we're nailing with a hammer, shaking our hands with a little bit more of an Eastern grip, and then as if we're flipping an omelet, a little more of a semi-Western grip. So for your backhand, since you're using your dominant hand at the bottom of the shot, it will go the opposite way. So you might see some people using a Continental grip for backhand. It's very common, especially if you have an Eastern or a Continental on your forehand, because it's easy to just move, put the other hand over at the top. Now, if you have a Continental grip at the bottom, you're gonna have to manipulate the paddle face with your non-dominant hand, because the face of the paddle is pretty straight up. So you're gonna have to dominate it a little bit more with the hand that's over at the top to create the angle if you wanna get more spin on the ball. If you go Eastern, which is probably a little bit more common, or somewhere between Continental and Eastern for the backhand side, it's gonna be a little easier. The paddle's already facing a little tilted, so it gives you more spin, and not a lot of maneuvering with the upper hand. It's just kind of sitting there helping you generate power with the top of the hand. So those are the two. I haven't really seen some semi-Western, but I guess it is possible to do it. Again, it's when I see people with a very extreme grip on the backhand side, I can see that the transitioning from one side to the other is going to be really hard to go from essentially the opposite to the opposite on the other side. So going from a semi-Western to a semi-Western is essentially going from this side all the way to this side. That's a lot of time. People can get away with it from the baseline. It's not something we're gonna probably see at the kitchen line. Okay, so here you have your Continental grip with just the hand over at the top. So if Susannah gets on the Continental grip and then puts her hand over at the top, if she wanted to move the ball around, she's gonna use more of that top hand, because as you can see, I'm a little limited with the angle of my paddle. If I go a little more Eastern, which is the opposite Eastern than the forehand Eastern, right? It's moving the other direction. Then you can see that right away her paddle's already facing a little bit down, which will help her to generate more spin. And then she doesn't have to do so much maneuvering with the top hand. And then the last one, just like on the forehand side, very few players that I think can get away with this, is having a semi-Western on the back. And again, the face of the paddle is facing down so much. The benefit of it is you're gonna get so much more spin, but you're gonna be limited with how high the ball is. The balls are really low. It's gonna be really hard to get under that to generate the same level of pace on the ball. So now we're gonna demonstrate just a little bit of dinking with the different grips, and you can see some of the benefits, especially when we're in the kitchen line or the no volley zone. You know that you're not just hitting one specific shot, so you're gonna be able to have to go from a forehand to a backhand, or from a ball that's bouncing to a ball that's coming pretty quickly at you. So having a much more neutral grip, or one that you can kind of change from one to the other, is helpful. But it's also important to know that if you have time, as an example, if the player's in the baseline and I'm in the kitchen line and I have a lot of time, I can change and get a little more extreme and get a lot more spin on the ball if I have the time. So when you see some of the players maybe be using some of the more extreme grips for flicks or rolls, things like that, a lot of that is because they have the time. So they can go and switch from maybe an Eastern forehand to a semi-Western backhand, or an Eastern forehand to an Eastern backhand. There's definitely a lot of ways you can switch one to the other. Obviously, you can see that, especially at a higher level, you're gonna have to be pretty neutral with your kind of recovery with your paddle right back to the middle. I personally like using my non-dominant hand to help me switch the paddle. I know exactly where it feels like to have an Eastern, and I know how quickly I can get it to a Continental grip if I were to be blocking a ball. And so I use my non-dominant hand, and I moved it in the neck versus having to move my hand and kind of hope that my hand lands where I want it. So I use my non-dominant hand. Now, if you have two-handed backhand, you might do it a little more here, lower at the grip. I do it up here at the head because I have a one-handed backhand. So the first one that we're gonna do, I'm gonna just keep my Continental grip here. We're gonna be dinking here with Susannah. I'll also ask her to every once in a while speed up a ball at me, so I can show some of the benefits of having a pretty neutral grip for both forehand and backhand, okay? You can see that there was not a lot of transition from my forehand to the backhand because I have the same grip. So if she speeds up the ball, I'm ready. I don't have to do a lot of changes. I can kind of get back to my forehand. A little bit of the limitations is that to generate spin, I actually have to get it done with my paddle. So it doesn't happen naturally. You can see I gotta get under the ball a little bit more because my paddle's pretty straightforward. It's facing the net, straightforward, which I have to make sure that if I want spin, you can see I'm very limited with some of the spins I can get. It all has to happen with my paddle head speed. How quickly can I speed it up? So a lot of the times you're gonna see some of the players also just drop the wrist so that they can get under the ball, because as you can see, my wrist is pretty straight up, right? Paddle is in front, and it just naturally sits to the side. And so I'm gonna have to kind of get under the paddle. You're gonna see some of that happen a little bit more with the Continental. Back in the day, in racket sports, this is how people started playing. So it's a very traditional grip. So you might see, like for me, I was taught by an older coach in tennis. So when we volleyed, we learned to volley with a Continental grip, right? So I had the same level of access no matter where the ball came. Ay! You can see I have to make sure I'm hitting the ball out in front. Otherwise I have to slow down the pace a little bit. A little harder for me to get more spin on the ball. And again, as you can see, I don't even need my non-dominant hand there because I'm not switching grips. Essentially staying with the same grip on both. It's probably what people used back in the day when they used to have their hand on their pocket when they played. You laughed about that. We do a lot, right? But Ben Johns, like back in the day, he used to always do that. Okay, the next one we're gonna go to is a little bit more Eastern. So as I'm going Eastern, you can see that my paddle, so this is Continental, is pretty much straight on the line. When I go a little Eastern, my paddle is now tilted a little bit more forward. So you're gonna see what that does to the ball, okay? So right away, I can get a little bit more spin. Same thing, I have to make sure I hit the ball out in front. And I get a little bit more spin on the ball. I gotta make sure I have my dominant hand on the other side because I do have to change it back to, I have a Continental grip, somewhere between Continental and Eastern on my backhand. And so I gotta make sure that I have enough time to switch. Same thing for those balls at me. Ooh, you could see I didn't have time to change. I got lucky. It's a lot easier actually too. If I go cross court with Susannah, I'm gonna love my Eastern grip because I have so much time to hit the ball. So the other thing that we didn't cover is what happens if you want to slice the ball. Again, if you want to slice the ball, you want to have a pretty good Continental grip. So because I gotta get and cut the ball, so when I'm cutting, my paddle cannot be facing slightly down. It actually has to be facing up. So I gotta be able to cut it this way. If I have an Eastern grip, my paddle's this way. So when I do that, my ball's gonna pop up. So I really have to make sure I have a Continental grip to hit the slice on both sides, both the forehand and the backhand. If I were slicing, very easy to transition. Is that good, or you need me to keep failing at this grip? If you're using a semi-Western grip on the forehand side or the backhand, you see this a little bit with the players that want to attack a lot and trying to hit those balls in the air, starting some of the fights. It's kind of difficult to hit that shot with dinking unless you have a lot of time because of how much you will need to transition from one side to the other. So you have to be aware that you don't have as much time to go from this shot to this shot. And so it's important that you understand that when you're making that choice. It might help you for one side, but it might be hurting you on the other side. It is a grip that I personally feel a lot more comfortable if I was hitting like a full drive on my forehand. I do use a semi-Western on my forehand when I'm attacking the ball because again, I have plenty of time to hit the very next ball. I'm not rushed to be hitting the ball with very little distance at the net. I don't know who hits like that. Kwong, I guess, hits Riley Newman. Yeah, we're talking about just a few examples of some of the players that might use a semi-Western grip that again, maybe also don't have a full swing. So for me, I have a kind of like a semi-follow through on my dink. So I want to make sure that when I do that, I have enough time. So you can see like Susannah was explaining, Riley Newman, he has a pretty short swing here. So he's able to actually get under. You can see he also has to drop his wrist. I think it will be hard for him to be able to hit that ball with that extreme grip on the side. Same with Kwong, right? He's coming over the ball because, again, your paddle is facing the net so much more. So you have to make sure you're really brushing that ball. So that's probably why they go this way, right? Or if they have the space, maybe from mid-court or the baseline, they can attack because they have enough time to give a full follow through. So if they're here, right, they're able to really attack that ball. I get tons of spin a lot more easier to hit that ball to get tons more spin. But again, it's something that you have to do when you have a lot more time. And again, if your game is aggressive and you know that you can do that quickly from one to the other, absolutely, I think it's a good choice for you. So the thing you got to think about when you're thinking about grips is it working for me? Do I have enough time to transition to the other shot if I'm being picked on from one side to the other? Am I generating the speed or the spin that I would like for me to be successful? And then assess from there, right? There's no perfect formula on grips. There are some people that are somewhere in between. So for me, like I'm often see myself between Continental and Eastern, just somewhere there where it's just not enough to be an Eastern grip, but not a Continental enough, where I feel like I get a tiny bit more spin on my ball when I'm dinking.
Well, I was just saying that, you know, one of the players that uses the semi-Western grip, when it's dinking, almost everything is a backhand at that stage, right? So instead of turning to a forehand, they're almost hitting everything with this backhand because that's more comfortable to get it low. But then anything high, they're almost pancaking it.
Yeah,
so.
I want to point something out. So go back to what you're doing there without changing your grip. You can see that if Susannah wanted to maneuver to go there or there, you can see that there's a little bit more stress on the wrist. So again, if you have, like for me, I've had some past injuries on my wrist, so I don't actually want to go too Western because I know that I'm exposing my wrist to a lot more tension, and so I want to make sure that that's helpful. But you can see if you can get away with it, if you can, you know, still move it without having to change your grip when it's coming fast at your feet. Again, it's again you see the benefit, right? You can go from here to pancake. So it really just depends. I think the background too. When I see like volleyball players, they want to hit a lot of balls this way, right, with an open hand. So of course they're going to choose a much more semi-Western because this feels like they're smacking the ball with an open hand, right? And so we have to be, as coaches, curious as to what's helping the athlete be successful. And if in their background they've always hit with the hand, or everything that they do is with the hand open this way, we might want to explore and see if that's a grip that actually helps them be successful, even though they might have a little less time to transition to a backhand. We can always assess that. I mean, we could all just actually, like, Dom has a pretty continental grip on his forehand. I have a much more Eastern, and Susannah, you're a little bit more, you're close to a semi.
I was realizing.
Yeah, you're close to a semi. Yeah, you're not Eastern. You're a little more, and again, there's not like perfect, right? You're like somewhere in between.
I was really Eastern, but doing this.
No, you're a little, yeah.
I'm a little more semi.
So just feed me some like easy balls, forehands and backhands, and I can actually show, you can see like how little transition from one side to the other. So again, the Continental is not my grip, it's a little more traditional. I don't have to change. You can go forehand, backhand. You can see my paddle is facing straight up. A little harder for me to generate spin, but I can hit the ball pretty nice and flat. If I wanted more spin, I have to get under the ball and kind of do that because, again, the paddle is facing straight at the net. You can kind of see the face, very traditional. Very little time between one and the other, so if they came fast, a lot of changes. All right, so now we're gonna go a little more Eastern. This is kind of where I sit more with my forehand. This is an Eastern grip, which is what I will use, and I also use an Eastern on my backhand. So now you can see that I have to go from here to here. It's not a lot of switch, but definitely enough between one and the other. So you'll see me use my non-dominant hand to change from one grip to the other. And I get a lot more spin. There's a little bit more shape on the ball. I gotta make sure I hit it a little faster or the ball is gonna float. So semi-Western, one I'm not super comfortable with. Again, the acceleration has to be pretty fast. Your paddle is very tilted to the ground, so you have to make sure you make this movement pretty quick so that you're not hitting the ball into the ground. So if you're not comfortable and you're like, why am I hitting the balls on the ground? You might be a little too extreme on that semi-western. Again, you can always play around somewhere between that semi-western and eastern. So somewhere that you feel comfortable will also be helpful if you're looking for a little bit more spin. See how this goes. Woo! See you right in the neck. See, I gotta accelerate a lot more. There you go. And really gotta get out in front too. You hit a little late, it's not gonna go over. You can see that my paddles changes when I'm about to hit.
Clap 2 times. There you go.
You want
One
to
more,
slap your
one
own?
more. Let's see it. All right, let's go.